So what a lot of people will tell you is that, oh, the velo will come as you age, as you get older. And, that's true for some people. Some people are going to, get to 17, 18, 19 years old and start throwing in the 90s. But that's a really risky approach to take. Most people aren't going to do that. Most people are going to have to take the velo into their own hands and be like, all right, I got to train this, instead of hoping that you're one of the guys that you're 17, 18, 19 years old, and then suddenly you start throwing 95 miles an hour.
All right, we're live. Josh, it's been a couple of weeks since we've done a regular podcast, just the two of us. Had Kate Povich on last week, and then the week before you were traveling, so I had to do a solo episode. So it's good to be back. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, as you said, it's been a while, but last week's episode was really fun, getting to know Cade and how he dominates the minor leagues, and trying to implement some of his stuff into my game. But yeah, it's harder than it sounds.
Yeah, what did you like about him? What stood out that he said?
The couple things, like just how he throws his pitches. I was experimenting with a little bit of those, especially his sweeper, his cutter. I liked how he threw his cutter. Also, just focusing. He talked a lot about focal point. So just looking at the right field foul pole and refocusing, and then getting back into the just being able to focus back into your target. That's something that I did try, but he's a starter and he has 6 innings to do that stuff. I'm a relief, so I come in and I have to just go out and compete, and so sometimes I forget to do that stuff. But it was really good to listen to from an elite and what he actually does. I actually saw on the leaderboard the other day that he's first or second in strikeouts right now in the whole of minor leagues. So that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, especially as a starter. I mean, it's insane. Yeah, he's north of 30% by a good margin. So, yeah, he's off to a good start. I really liked how he talked about how last year when he first got to AAA, it was like he was a little starstruck in a way, to where, he was almost giving hitters and the players too much credit. And it was almost like he didn't know yet if he was at that caliber and if he could step his game up to that level. He didn't use those exact words, but that was kind of my interpretation of it. And then made the adjustment this year of really looking at hitters for what they are and understanding that hitting is very hard, and that if he executes his game more times than not, he's going to be successful because he is a very good pitcher. So I thought that was cool to see that mind shift change from last year to this year. And I'm sure you can relate, and I can relate from lower levels of say high school to college. Like, there is a little bit of an adjustment period where you kind of have to prove to yourself that you belong. And I think it's pretty cool to hear his transformation from one year to the next.
Yeah, I think it was really cool to hear, especially after his trade. He said that he's a shy person, so he had a little bit of time to adjust to the new team, and I could relate to that because I'm also introverted, a little bit shy. I also got traded, and I went through that whole experience, and so just listening to how he handled that and how he's overcome that, and now just absolutely dominating, was awesome.
Real quick, everyone, I wanted to let you know about my new course called Pitch Design U. It's set to launch on June 10th. I'm going to be covering the fundamentals of pitch movement, how to throw every single pitch type, as well as knowing which one is right for you, and the analytics behind all pitch types, how, when, and where to use your arsenal. I have a wait list right now where I'm sending weekly insights on details about the course. If you're interested, check out the link in the show notes. All right, back to the show. Yeah, for sure. No, really good stuff. Well, how'd your week go on the field? We texted a little bit, but give us a quick rundown on just performance on how things went this week.
This week was it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good by any means. I had 2 outings. I had one on Friday and Sunday, and to be honest, I can't even remember what I did on Friday. But yesterday, what happened was, I came in with a runner on second, and I had what happened was I threw a wild pitch, a slider that just kind of slipped out. and then I run on third and I balked because they said that I didn't come to a full stop, and so that wasn't good. I just let that run in, but then after that, I got 3 clean outs. So yeah, just working on throwing more strikes and getting back, getting my velo up, and yeah, overall there's stuff to work on, but it wasn't too bad.
Good. No, yeah, it looks like you've done a really good job of limiting runs, and you've had a lot of really quick innings. I think I saw your game yesterday. Would you throw 9 pitches in 1 inning?
Yeah, I think something like that. Yeah.
No, that's great, dude. Well, let's jump into today's topic. So, with a lot of high schools, especially where I'm from in Arizona, like high school seasons are ending. A lot of college seasons are ending. Division One is approaching the end. So now we're getting closer to summer ball, where guys are deciding whether they want to play summer ball, they want to shut down, do they want to just deload? There's so many options they can do. And I know we've talked about this in the past, about some of the things that we've done personally, and we'll dive into those a little bit more. But I think like an important thing to talk about is right when your season ends, like, do you think that there is at least a little bit of time where a player should shut down completely? Or what's your take on, immediately after the season, what should most pitchers do?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It would really depend on your situation. And I think there's 2 situations. So there's one situation where you're in a really good spot and you feel comfortable going into next season. Your velo is good, everything's good, and like you feel like you don't have to. I don't want to say you don't have to improve much, but you are more optimizing for health and like durability and stuff like that. And the other situation is you're just not in the spot that you want to be, and you have to improve by big margins to be able to get to where you want to be. And so for the first group, I would say, yeah, shutting down would be good. I think, I don't know, like if we're talking about high school, college, how long the off season is, but especially Pro Bowl, like if you're in a good spot, then a lot of the guys will shut down for, like two weeks to a month to maybe even 6 to 8 weeks, just depending on what you like. But yeah, I think that's awesome to just get a mental break as well, physical break. I know I read something way back from Eric Cressy saying it takes probably like a month for all the tendons to fully recover in your arm. So I don't know. I might be wrong on that. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, I don't know the exact time frame, but I think you're on the right track with that stuff. And you said something that really stood out to me is more than anything, usually guys need a little bit of a breather mentally, right? Like it's been a long season, good or bad. Like it's good to kind of get away for a little bit, even if it's just for a week, to go hang out with your friends and family, go do other things, just to kind of clear your head, and then you can start building back up or doing whatever your program's going to be. And you're right. It is complicated. Like there isn't just a clear-cut answer of do this, this, and this, and you're golden. Every player should do the same thing. It's not a clear-cut answer. The way I like to look at it is asking a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions that you can ask yourself that can help you get to the answer that you need. So I'm going to pull up a couple of my questions, and we can kind of dive into them, and then you can add what your thoughts are. So the first thing I like to think about is before I shut down or before I decide what is my next move, I need to know when is the next time that I absolutely need to be built up again, and I need to be ready to go at game speed. So let's just say I'm a college player at a Division III school. My season just ended 2 weeks ago, and I know on September 1st, we have our first scrimmage, and I'm going to need to be able to throw 1 to 2 innings. If that is you, at the bare minimum, for you to determine how much time you can take off from the most standpoint, you would work backwards from that September 1st date and build yourself up accordingly from there. So always start with the end in mind and then work your way backwards. Once again, this would only be a situation where you just want to be built up enough to where you're ready to go for games. You want to take as much time off as you possibly can. This isn't allotting for, pure development time of, let's say, 2 to 3 months of velocity work or pitch design work, whatever it might be. This would be just enough to build yourself back up. So that's the first question I would ask yourself. is where do I need to be by whatever my next competitive game is or my next team setting is going to be. Have you thought about it through that framework before, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You need to know exactly how long you have until the next big showcase or the next big game, because that's how you can start to formulate a little bit of a plan. And so, going back to what I was saying, like if you're not in a spot where you think you should be and you want to be, and you need to prepare for the big showcase or the big season coming up for something, you can plan accordingly. And so maybe you can break that into, like half of it, I'm going to do purely velocity training. And then I'm going to start incorporating pitch design, mound work, and then getting into, live ABs, bullpens, stuff like that. But yeah, you definitely need to know exactly how long you have. And then from that, you can start to formulate a little bit of a plan and action plan of where you want to go.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And my next question, we kind of just talked about, but how do I feel physically and mentally? So obviously, am I a little beat up? Is my arm, beat up a little bit? Is my back bothering me? Is there something that just doesn't feel right? And then mentally, do I need a refresher? For you, pro ball's different than college and high school. It's a much longer season. But like, what are some things that you like to do after a season to kind of get yourself back on track physically and mentally? Is there anything specific you do, or is it just purely getting away from the game for a little bit?
Yeah, I think a mental refresh is such an underrated thing because, it can really compound on you, and just like out of nowhere, you can be like, damn, I'm just mentally burnt out. So I think that's a really, really important piece, just to get away from the game for a little bit. And for me, I love just traveling. And so I'm from Sydney, Australia. So every off season, I go back to Australia and, go to the beach, reconnect with family. And I do that. Sometimes I go to Japan because my mom's from Japan. So I go and see family there. But yeah, for me, it's just getting away from the game by going to a different country and just traveling a little bit and just doing stuff that I really enjoy, just to get a mental refresh. And then when I come back, I'm ready to go and give my best effort.
Yeah, what's great about taking a mental refresher is it gets your motivation kind of going again. Like you kind of get the itch as you're getting close to the end of your little break of wanting to, pick up a baseball again, wanting to get in the weight room or whatever it might be. And not that like you completely lose that, but I do feel like when you step away for a little bit, it kind of reminds you of how much you love this game, or you don't. And if you don't, maybe it's time to retire at that point. But for the most part, when you love the game, like taking a little bit of a break, it just re-sparks a little bit of that drive and motivation to get back to work. So I think that's really good. The next thing after that, so we've established, okay, at the bare minimum, we gotta have the end in mind. When do I need to be ready for that showcase, for fall practices, whatever it might be? What is the bare minimum, what is the maximum amount of time I can afford to take off to have enough time to build up? Number two after that is, okay, how do I feel physically and mentally? Next thing would be, what are my long-term goals? And this is gonna apply in and factor into how much time I actually do choose to take off and what I do end up doing this summer, whether it's playing or training solely. So what are my long-term goals? And then the follow-up question with that is, am I on track to accomplish those goals? So Josh, like for you, what have been, actually, let's go back to 16 years old, or let's go back to 15, around that time frame. What were your long-term goals, and were you on track to accomplish them before you started your training journey?
Yeah, it's funny. So I did both. When I was a senior in high school, my situation was that I was nowhere close to where I wanted to be and where I had to be to achieve my long-term goals, which was to go to a established university. Didn't have to be D1, maybe like a powerhouse JUCO, something like that. That was my big goal, or sign professionally. And so, when I was 16, I was topping out like 82 miles an hour, something like that. So yeah, I was, you're not getting recruited as a guy throwing 82. So it was pretty clear that I had to take the whole summer off and just go do velo training. And so what I did was I would follow Driveline's program. I even went to Seattle to do a whole Driveline cycle with them. And just doing that and not caring about command or going out and competing, just solely focus and obsessing about velo increased my velo by, like 10 miles an hour. And I think that's such a valuable thing where it's like, if you have a singular focus of, all right, in my case, it was velo. So, all right, all I'm going to do, I'm going to optimize my whole life around gaining velo. And then you take, 4 to 6 months off. Like, I can pretty much guarantee that you're going to gain, like, I don't know how many, but you're going to gain velo. And so that's what I did. I was 16 and I took the whole summer off to do velo training, and then I was able to get to where I wanted to be. Now the next year, I had already got recruited, and summertime comes up, and my goals shifted. So this time I wasn't looking to gain velo or anything. I needed to go out and compete and gain game experience. And so I was an incoming freshman, and I went and played in the West Coast League. Not many people know this about me, but I played for the Victoria Harbour Cats for 2 games because I wanted to get game time experience and start competing against better talent, because this was the first time I was in the US and people wanted to see me compete against the the top college talents. And so that's what I did for 2 games. And then after that, I signed professionally. But yeah, it's I did both. I had to firstly develop, and then next I had to gain game time experience and go compete.
Yeah. So for you, the long-term goal was, well, I guess there was 2, right? There was play at a Power 5 school or like a major Division I school / or professional baseball. So like those were like the overarching themes. And for you, you knew that at least step 1 was you have to throw harder. You were throwing 82 miles an hour. You're not going to sign professionally. You're not going to go to a major Division I school throwing 82. So that was your first process stat, or not stat, your first process goal to accomplish your long-term goal. So that, I think that's a perfect example. Like when we're talking long-term goals, we're talking what is the peak of where you want to play. Maybe it's professional, maybe it's the major leagues, maybe it's you just want to play really good college baseball. Whatever it is, determine what that is, and then see, am I on track? Is what I am currently doing going to put me in a position to have an opportunity to do that? And if it's not, then that's what's going to lead us to what the next question is, which is what areas of my game do I need to improve the most? So for you in that moment, it was you needed to improve velocity. Once you did that, then it was time to test your abilities against hitters and get back into that game setting. But we have to be really honest during this evaluation with where are we currently? And something that could be helpful is find people that are actually at the level that you want to play at, that you can trust, and that they will give honest feedback on where they think you currently stand and where you need to improve. Now, it should be fairly obvious. Like if you're throwing 82, it's pretty clear, yeah, I'm not throwing hard enough. But in some cases, maybe it is a little bit of a gray area for you. Maybe you're 88 to 90 and you have decent stuff, but like you don't feel like you're quite there. Maybe you do need some insight and some advice from someone that is at that level that can speak truth into you on what they think you need the most. But just make sure that you're talking to someone that like you really can trust and that is going to give you honest feedback and isn't going to just say, yeah, keep doing what you're doing and you're going to end up where you want to go. Because that happened to me a lot. Like I asked several coaches throughout my career, like, hey, my goal is to play professional baseball. Like, what do I need to do? And I had countless times, oh, you're doing the right things. Keep working hard. You're going to be where you want to be at the end of the day. And I wasn't. And I should have realized, I should have known looking at myself in the mirror that I needed to throw harder and I needed to do certain things to get there. But when you're young, you're a teenager, you can have blind spots. You might not necessarily see those things as clear as you should, which is another thing I come back to with you, Josh. Like your ability to be honest with yourself of what needed to change is super, super impressive. And then the fact that you backed it up with the work to get there is even more impressive. So I think that's a really big learning lesson for teenagers through this process is being very, very honest with where you currently are. And if you really want to get to a high level, if you really want to play Division I baseball or professional baseball, you have to be honest with where you're at and then also back up where you want to go with the work ethic. So I think that's super important. So velocity is one piece, but like, let's talk a little bit more about, other areas of your game that you need to improve. What do you think are some other examples for guys, apart from velocity, that they might need to improve or change in order to get to their long-term goals of professional baseball or Division I baseball?
Yeah, for sure. Before I touch on that, though, I wanted to talk about one thing that I see often, and what I was told a lot when I was, in those shoes throwing, 16. I was 16 throwing, 82 miles an hour. So what a lot of people will tell you is that, oh, the velo will come as you age, as you get older. And, that's true for some people. Some people are going to, get to 17, 18, 19 years old and start throwing in the 90s. But that's a really risky approach to take. Most people aren't going to do that. Most people are going to have to take their velo into their own hands and be like, all right, I got to train this, instead of hoping that you're one of the guys that you're 17, 18, 19 years old, and then suddenly you start throwing 95 miles an hour. Do you see that around baseball, Jared?
100%. I mean, yeah, kind of alluded to it, but like that was my case. Like that's what people kept saying. Just it'll come as you get older. You're going to naturally get bigger and stronger. And it's like, yeah, I might have a gradual progression of 1-2 miles an hour between, 14 or 13 and 18 years old. Yeah, I'm going to throw a little bit harder naturally. But like, if my starting point is 70 miles an hour and I end up being at 80 by the end of high school, like that's still not good enough to get me where I want to go. So just comes back to like the long-term goals. Like if you just want to have a good high school career, maybe play a lower level college and have fun, like that's perfectly fine. And I think most of our messaging is usually geared towards people that want to play at some of the highest levels of Division I and professional baseball. So the language we use and the way we talk is usually geared towards that. But I do want to make it clear, like if that isn't your aspirations and like playing at a lower level is what you want to do, and school is more of the primary focus, like that's perfectly fine too. Just wanted to make that as a side note. Like we're really pushing towards people that are wanting to play at the highest level with some of this language that we're using.
Yeah, for sure. And so other things that's, except for velocity, I would say, it comes back to, say, just command and off-speed stuff. But that's definitely secondary to velo. As you said, if you don't want to play at a super high level, like D1 professional, then maybe you can start optimizing for that, like start training command and off-speed before velo. But if you really want to reach the top levels, then I think the steps go velo, command, and then pitch design / off-speed. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what you were going to say number 2 was. I was interested to hear that. Yeah, I agree. Like once you get to a certain level of velocity, like that has to be number 1 to a certain point. And then, yeah, number 2, I would say command. And the reason I would say pitches and pitch design and shapes and all that would be third is because if your velocity is good and it's going up, your off-speed pitch is going to get better with that as well. So those pitches are going to improve. Maybe the shapes aren't going to be great and all that, but it's going to be semi-decent purely because of the velocity standpoint. So yeah, I would definitely say command would be number 2 right there to make sure that you can throw your stuff in the zone. Because like you said, I remember you saying you're at the Driveline Pro Day, you didn't throw one strike, and that was probably a moment for you where you're like, okay, yeah, I probably need to work on throwing some strikes a little bit more because now I need to have a little bit more of a balance. But that first primary goal is velocity. Now, let me ask you this, because there is some gray area with some of this. I work with a couple of kids that are, 17, 18 years old that are seniors, maybe going to their freshman year. They're going to maybe go the junior college route. And they're 87 to 90, right? Like they're at decent velo. At that velo, do you think that they should still be selling out for velocity? Or do you think at that point, like, yes, they should still be doing some velocity training, but like they probably need to be harnessing in some of these other aspects so that they have an opportunity to get recruited by some Division I schools out of junior college?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think if you had already been doing a ton of velocity work and then now you're at 87, 90, then maybe you can start to train more the command and off speed and really be like, all right, like I've been doing all this velocity work and I've been able to get to 87, 90. And now I'm just going to optimize for just competing and just dominating. But if you're an 87, 90 guy and you've never really done velocity work, 100% just go and do velocity work, because that might spike you to 93, 95, which is, that's what's going to get you to the next level. I think if you're an 87 to 90 guy, those are the two scenarios. You either have to spike to the next like echelon of velo, which is, touching 93, 94, 95 miles an hour, or you just got to go out and absolutely dominate. And so kind of got to figure out which one you're more likely to be able to do and then just sell out on that.
Yeah, I like that. That's an interesting point. Yeah, if you're at 87 to 90 right now and you haven't done really any velocity, quote unquote, velocity work, and that's just gotten you there naturally, yeah, there might be an opportunity where you can make a pretty big jump, unless you were a guy that, was like you, maybe that was 80 and then you gained 7 to 10 miles an hour within a year through some velocity focused work. So that's an interesting perspective. Do you think, and I'll give my opinion after you, but like, do you think people can work on velocity and command at the same time? Or do you think that it's better to only focus on one at a time because you're going to get more out of whatever that focus is?
Yeah, for sure. I just want to quickly touch on this as well, is that if you're a guy who's been doing a lot of velo work, and for example, you started at 80 and then you're at 87, 88, you might think that whatever you did that got you from 80 to 88 will take you from 88 to 95. But often case, that's not the case. It's a lot easier to go from 80 to 88 than 88 to 93, 95. And so that's a trap that I see a lot of people fall into, is that, pull downs and plyo velo twice a week might get you to, 90, 91, but then they keep doing it and keep trying to squeeze the juice out of that to try to get to the upper echelons. And I'm not saying they don't work to get there, but I'm just saying, like, whatever got you from 80 to 88 might not work to get to the upper echelons of velo, because it's just so hard to gain velo when you're at that top level of low to mid, high 90s. So yeah, that's something that I quickly wanted to touch on. Sorry, what was it? What was the question again?
Velocity and command. Do you think that you can train them at the same time?
Yeah, I think so. That's kind of what I did during. So after I had that big velo spike from when I was starting, like 80 miles an hour, and then I was at about 91 miles an hour, but I still wanted to continue to get that velo work in, but I also had to show that I could compete. I did a thing where midweek I would do my velocity work, and so it would be like pull downs, plyo velos, but then I'd throw like a bullpen afterwards. And so I'm trying to blend the two. So I'm getting my velo work in, but then I'm throwing a bullpen where I'm working on my execution and command. And then on the weekends I'll go play a game, which is all about command and execution and stuff like that. So I do think you can do that, but if your goal is to optimize for one of them, I feel like the better approach is to just sell out on one of them, because that's how you're going to get the most out of your training.
Yeah, I would generally agree with that. Like, you start doing multiple things at once and trying to get better at multiple things at once, you're probably just going to marginally improve at all of them, versus solely focusing on one and really skyrocketing your performance in that area. With that said, I do think, there's still regular opportunities to generally work on command, right? Like, you're still playing catch most days. So there's an opportunity for you to have some sort of focus with your targeting. Maybe you're even using differential balls in catch play, maybe a medium day. Let's just say your velo days are Mondays and Fridays. Medium days, you're not going, Wednesdays, which would be a medium day. You're not going super high intensity, but you're doing enough work to where maybe you have a little bit of a focus with targeting focus and you're working on something command related. So I think there's opportunities there. It's just like, on those velocity days, or if you're in that velocity phase, like really selling out for it, because that is evidently what you need during that time. So making sure that you're actually maximizing it and you're not just treading water in multiple areas and not actually improving and kind of wasting, that extended period of time. So I do think that's a really good thought process. And the time of year obviously will play a factor. Now we're approaching the summer. So like this is a time that I've been telling kids, whether you're high school or college, this is one of the few opportunities, or really it's the only opportunity I would say for college guys, where you have a 2 to 3 month time period where you're kind of on your own to do what you want. You can train, you can do whatever you want while you're at home, or if you're playing summer ball, obviously you're on your own there. But the rest of the year, you're with your school. Whatever they want you to do, you're going to do, with the exception of 1 to 2 weeks here and there for holidays. The summer is really a big, big opportunity for guys to make huge strides and to separate themselves from the competition. So now it starts to come down to the next question. We've talked about what are your long-term goals? What are the areas that you actually need to improve the most to accomplish those goals, or at least to get you on track? Now you have to ask yourself this question. Does training or playing summer ball give you a better opportunity to improve at whatever that area is? So let's dive into summer ball a little bit. We've talked about this before, but like, let's start with the idea of playing summer ball for high school and college kids. Who do you think should play summer ball? Like, who would be a no-brainer? Like, yeah, if they want to play summer ball, that would make perfect sense.
Guys that need exposure, really. It's guys that, for pitches, guys that are throwing, probably like 90 plus and decent at competing. And we're talking college guys, right?
High school and college. So let's stay with this. Stay with college for now.
Okay. Yeah, for college, I think, you need to be throwing 90 plus and you're able to compete. And you go on a summer ball to learn to compete and get more game time and innings. That's something that I did when I played as an incoming freshman. I was already able to throw 93, 94, 95 miles an hour. And what the missing piece was I had to get more innings and get used to competing. That being said, it's tough because I know that colleges need to win. And so they're going to send guys, even if they're, not 90 plus, they're going to go send them to learn how to throw strikes and go compete and be a valuable asset to the team the next season. And so it is difficult, but I would say for the most part, it's for guys who need exposure and they're not lacking stuff or velo. They're lacking the ability to compete and command.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this next one's a little bit tough because I can see both sides of it. Let's say you have a guy that threw 5 innings this season and he was healthy. It wasn't an injury. It was just he threw 5 innings because he was at the bottom of the list on your pitching staff. I can see where that guy needs to play summer ball because he didn't really get any innings. But at the same time, the reason he didn't get innings is because he wasn't good enough. So does playing summer ball make him better, or does training and actually working on whatever was deemed poor, does he need to focus on that and train that during the summer? That's one where like I could go 50-50 with that. Like I could definitely justify that guy playing summer ball, but I could also justify him solely training. I think if it's like a freshman, let's just say it's a freshman that threw 5 innings that year, which is very common for freshmen not to pitch much. I could see the value in them pitching that summer just because they haven't really faced college competition. So like sending them to a decent league like the West Coast League or something, which is a common league for freshmen to go to. Like I could see the value in him going and getting 30 innings this summer to where he can face competition. And at the same time, like if this guy is going to be someone that pitches for you a lot the next year, something that we have to think about too is the workload. So like having a guy going from 0 innings one year to now the next year, we're expecting him to throw 50 to 70 innings. Like that's a big jump. So I think that's another part that like we haven't talked about much, but like your workload of innings does matter and does play a factor. So like taking a whole year off, like especially if you're in college, having a whole year where you're not throwing any innings virtually and just training, like I don't know if that's necessarily the best route either, because if we're expected to throw a lot the next year, and the reason we're doing this so that we can pitch next year a good amount of innings, I don't know how prepared we're going to be for that amount of workload just because it's such a big jump from one year to the next. So that's one of my thoughts. But like, what do you think about that? Like a college freshman through minimal innings, like, do you think he should train or do you think he should play summer ball?
I think he should train because again, it goes back to what your goals are. But if you want to set yourself up for like a successful junior season and then potentially get drafted or something like that, then you're gonna have to train at one point, especially if you're not getting the innings because you weren't good enough. That probably means like you don't throw enough strikes, or you don't throw hard enough, or your just stuff just doesn't play. And so, if your goal is to get to the next level and maybe even get drafted, then you're gonna have to improve that at some point. And you can do that in summer ball by getting innings, but I think if you're a freshman, then you have time. Like you can go out and train for 3-4 months, and that could be one of the most transformational things that you ever do. And so, I think it'd be different if you're more older, junior, senior. Then like you kind of know where you stand, and if you're not getting innings there, then you probably know that you're probably not going to get drafted or anything. So maybe you can go to a summer ball league and really try to um, maximize what you've got, and then come back and be a valuable piece to the team. But especially for freshmen or younger, I would say go train.
I had a feeling you might say that. So this might be the first thing we semi disagree with, which is good. I think it makes good conversation because, and it's not that I disagree, because I definitely can see the value in that. Like I 100% can. What I did was after my freshman year, so I went to junior college. I pitched quite a bit. I mean, I threw 55 innings my freshman year, and I didn't throw hard. I was, 80, 82, I would say. Then they weren't really radaring us most games, or if they were, they weren't telling us how hard we were throwing. But I played summer ball. Like then, this was 2011. So back then, like it was kind of normal. Like you're gonna play summer ball. Like it was kind of unheard of for people just to take the summer off to train, unless they had an incredibly high workload. So, but I did know that I needed to throw harder. So what I did was I actually still pitched. I just played in the Arizona League, Arizona Wood Bat League, and I pitched once a week. So I would throw every Friday or every Saturday, whatever it was. And then during the week, I was training pretty intensely. Now then, I wasn't doing weighted balls, but I was doing a lot of lawn toss. I was doing pull downs essentially with the baseball, just like compression throws on the way in from lawn toss. And then I was really lifting hard. Like that was the biggest thing. I was pretty weak and light, so I needed to gain weight and get stronger. And I made a big jump in velocity as a result. But I will say, so what was interesting was that fall, my velo I was actually 85 to 88 that fall, from being 80 to 82 the previous spring. And then when the season came around, I don't know if it was because like I just never stopped and I was going hard the whole year, but like my velo went down during my sophomore season. I was like 83 to 85. I don't even know if I touched 88 that season, honestly. So I was throwing harder in the fall than I was in the spring. So I don't know if it's just because of the accumulation of all the workload of I threw 55 innings during the spring, and then I threw another, I want to say 65 innings during the summer. So I was up over 100 innings at that point. And then in the fall, probably threw another 25 innings. So a pretty big workload without any really time off or deloading, essentially. So like that's another factor too when it comes to summer ball, because that is an option of training and playing. That sounds good in theory. You just have to be careful with the volume and making sure that you're actually giving yourself enough time to recover and thinking long term with that. But that was my experience. And, if I could go back with that, I probably would have just trained that summer and not play, especially since I got plenty of innings during during the spring. There was really no reason for me to get more innings other than I just liked pitching. That was really at the end of it. I loved competing and playing in games.
Yeah, for sure. I think it comes back to like knowing yourself. I think for you, Jared, you're a guy who could go out and compete and throw strikes. I'm not going to say easily, but it kind of came naturally to you. That was like one of your strengths. I feel like for me, I needed to train command and competing, because I couldn't just go out there and be like, all right, I'm just going to go throw strikes and compete. Like I had to train that. And so I don't think I would have been able to do that where I'll go play summer ball and really try to hone in on my velo. I need to just go all in on, all right, I'm going to gain this velo now, and then I'm going to switch my focus to command and competing. And so that's kind of where my head was at, and that suited me because, I'm not really naturally the best strike thrower or competitor. I'm more of a, I need to train that and have that, like bullpens and everything. I need to be training the execution to be able to do that in game. So, yeah, that's the kind of the path that I took. But I think for guys who are naturally good strike throwers and can compete, that's a really good option as well.
But even then, right? Like, I feel like being a strike thrower, like I was, like that was even more reason to not pitch during the summer. I should have just been training, right? Like for me, it was, I don't want to say I had the easiest thing to train or the easiest thing to focus on, but I kind of did, which was velocity. Like it's pretty clear cut, like how to throw harder. There's a lot more ways, or there's been a lot more guys that have improved their velocity than have improved command. Let's just say that. So the fact that I had that side of the game, like if I would have just dedicated 3 months of purely on that as a 19-year-old, I probably would have made pretty big jumps. And I did make good jumps doing that, but I had it in conjunction with playing, which still hindered the recovery time, still had to be factored into the workload over a long period of time. I'm curious, and this is a little side note, but like for you said, you felt like you had to train the command, the execution, the competing in a bullpen setting. Like what worked for you? What were some of the things that you did in those settings that like you felt like you couldn't do in a game setting?
In terms of like training it like in bullpens?
Yeah, you said you felt like you had to train it in the bullpens and with execution and competing, and you felt like you couldn't do that type of thing or training in a game setting. So like what exactly would you do in bullpens to work on that?
Yeah, so when I was doing my velo program, all I did was I would throw into a net that was like 20 feet from the mound, and then I'd have someone radaring it. And so there was just no command piece to it. It was just fully velo. And so when I was training for like command and getting ready to compete, I wasn't doing anything special, honestly. It was just I would just get into more I'll throw to a catcher and I'll get into more live ABs and just get used to that environment. And just getting reps in that environment is what got me ready to compete. But I didn't really do anything special. Like I should have been doing like the differential balls and stuff like that, really experiment with that. But yeah, I just kind of just threw bullpens and just I think the biggest thing was just focus. The focus was on execution versus getting the number up on the radar gun. And so it was more of a mentality and focus than any like training method or anything like that.
And you felt like it needed to be in a bullpen setting before a game setting just because you were doing purely velo work. So it was almost like following a progression where, okay, now let's just do this in a bullpen setting. After a little bit of time doing this, now we'll go to a game setting. Is that kind of the thought process?
Oh yeah, for 100%. There was no chance I was going to be able to go into a game after 6 months of velo work. Yeah, that would not have been good.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so we talked about college a little bit. Let's talk about some high school kids. And, I think at the younger ages, it's pretty clear like training would be the way to go if you're, 15, 16. But like, let's say you're a senior in high school going into your senior year. So you just finished your junior season. You're going to be going into your senior year next year. You haven't committed anywhere yet. Should they play summer ball to showcase where they're currently at, or is it come back to what you think of train, get good enough to actually be a product worth seeing? And then, even if it ends up being a little bit later to where it's next spring that teams end up seeing you and you can commit then, that's fine. Or do you think, is there harm, I guess I should say, in showcasing yourself during the summer, even if you're not at the caliber you want to be at, just in case something does happen to work out?
Yeah, I think if you're like a mid-level guy and you're kind of like fringy, like, oh, I might get recruited, I might not, then maybe there's value in that. But if you just know that, like, you can see the guys who are going to these to the places that you want to be at. And so if you compare yourself and you're just not even close, then I think it's just kind of like a waste of money. These showcases, they cost a lot of money. And so I'd rather invest that into the training side of things. But if you're a fringe guy, then and you're a good competitor and you want to go out and show that you can compete against some of the best guys, then yeah, for sure, I think go out there and then maybe you'll get some opportunities out of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear. I think people just, I don't know if FOMO is the word, or just fear in general of, oh, if I'm not there, well, then how are they going to see me? How am I going to get recruited? And I'm worried if I wait too long, then there's not going to be any opportunities. I especially when you see guys that are committing as freshmen in high school, sophomores in high school, signing, officially signing as juniors, like you see all these big names and these big guys sign with big schools, and you're like, man, they don't even have to worry. They've known where they're going to go to school for the last 3 years. And you can get fearful and panic a little bit. I definitely understand that part. I signed super late, and I went the junior college route, and I signed 2 months before school started. And there was a little bit of that, not so much in high school. I think in high school, I knew I was going to go junior college, so I wasn't really worried during the spring about getting recruited. But from junior college to a 4-year school, I definitely panicked a lot as a sophomore. It was the spring of my sophomore year, and I was still uncommitted. So I definitely was panicking a little bit. So I can understand the fear aspect, but you just have to, that's where you have to kind of sit back, evaluate the situation, and really look at it almost outside of your body. Like, try not to think of it emotionally. Just think of it logically of, okay, players that go to the school, the types of schools that I want to go to, they are able to do X, Y, and Z, most of them. Okay, how many of those 3 things am I able to do? And then decide, okay, no, you know what? I'm pretty low on the velocity part, or I'm pretty low on the command part, and I need to really commit to dedicating time to improving this so that I am actually a product we're seeing and getting recruited. And I'll tell you, there are so many opportunities that come up later in the year. Like, you might think, oh, I'm a senior. It's the spring of my senior year. There's not going to be any opportunities. There are always opportunities, especially if you're good enough. If you're good enough, there will be opportunities. Now, it might be different than you're expecting. It might be more last minute than you would like, but there are always opportunities. Scholarships fall through with people, players get hurt, things happen, coaching staffs change, and they go to different schools. There are so many factors that go into it. The bottom line is if you get good enough and you get to where you need to be, there will be opportunities for you, even if it's later than you originally wanted.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I want to touch on is that it only takes one showcase for you to get noticed. And that's what happened with me. Like, I was in Sydney, Australia. No one knew about me until I came over to the US and I came over to Arizona. And this was in my senior year. It wasn't even my junior year or anything. I was a senior, absolutely no name. No one knew me, but I was able to get into one showcase with a lot of scouts, Arizona Fall academic game. And I touched a 95, and word just spreads, just absolutely spreads. And so talent will always find a way, and it would only take one showcase for you to get those offers and opportunities. And so I think that's something that my biggest advice would be, like, talent will always find a way, and you don't have to get into these showcases or anything. Just keep investing in your training and have faith that you're going to be able to get to where you need to be. And when you are there and you think you're pretty close to where you want to be, then just get into showcases. And if you're good enough, then word will spread and you're going to be in a good spot.
It's a great way to put it. And I am going to re-say the question that we just went over, because I think it's just a good bow to put on this topic. Does training or playing summer ball give you a better opportunity to improve and reach your goals? That is the question of the day. That is the question you have to ask yourself and honestly reflect on. And then the follow-up question with that is, if you do choose to play summer ball, when will you have a substantial amount of time to solely train? Because I believe you do need a window. There needs to be a window where you don't have to worry about competition and you can purely focus on developing yourself, right? You look at professional baseball. It's a long season, yes, but on the minor league side, you have most of September, because the season ends for the lower levels at least Labor Day weekend. So you have most of September all the way until about February to develop before the next season. So you, as a professional, you have a good amount of time to where you can train and even factor in some downtime in the process. As a high school or college player, if I'm playing fall ball, so let's just say I'm playing fall ball, which I get to school around middle of August. I am with my school from middle of August till Christmas break. I then have maybe 3 or 4 weeks on my own before I come back to school in January. From January up until about this time of the year, or end of May, if you're a Division I, or even into June, if you're at a really good school. And then all that leaves is June, July, and part of August where you are on your own. And if you are going to play summer ball, you literally have zero amount of time to where you are on your own to purely solely train. So that is the framework I want to paint for you. The summer is the only opportunity you will have, especially as a college guy, to purely train. As a high school guy, you want to play summer ball, perfectly fine. But if you're going to play summer ball, I would recommend that you have the fall and the winter to really focus on your development and all those things to get ready for the spring season. So that's my 2 cents on that. Have you thought about it through that framework, and just like the idea of when you add things up, and if you're constantly playing, you literally are leaving zero time to actually solely train?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's something that I run into as well, where I play the whole of the minor league season, and then teams go ask me to go play in winnable leagues. And I've never really been a fan of that. I've done that a couple of times, but just being able to take a break and really develop yourself, go train during the off season, mentally and physically, is such a valuable piece. And it prevents burnout. And so I think for sure, I think that's a really important thing to be able to do.
That's great. Well, to wrap things up, I'm just going to run through these questions again. I'll post these questions too in the show notes, because I think these are good reflection questions to have as the season winds down. But the first thing to ask yourself at the end of the season is, when do I need to be built up again? Like, when do I absolutely need to be, whether it's for a showcase that I'm for sure going to, or my fall season, when do I need to be built up again? And then you'll work backwards from there on how you build out your plan and figure out what is the maximum amount of time that you can take off. And I actually do have some build-up plans, throwing build-up plans that I'll include in the show notes as well for anyone that's interested and wants an idea of how to properly build themselves back up. After that, then you have to ask yourself, how do I feel physically and mentally? Because that will play a huge factor in how much time I take off and what I do next, because we want to make sure that you're not getting burnt out, right? To your point, Josh, like, you get burnt out, you're going to lose that motivation. You're going to lose your love and passion for the game, and you're not going to get the most out of your training anyway. So you have to get that right. You got to get right mentally, and of course, physically. If you're beat up, we got to take care of that. We can't be throwing through injuries. Next, we have to ask ourselves, what are my long-term goals, and am I on track? What is the highest level of baseball I want to play to, whether it's short-term, so it could be, or let's look long-term, it could be I want to be a major leaguer, and then where do I want to be in the next year or so? Is it getting recruited to a Division I school or something like that? Am I currently on track to accomplish those long-term goals? From there, what are the areas of my game that I need to improve the most to get there? So be honest with yourself, reflect on this, and come up with a plan to accomplish that. Then from there, does training or playing summer ball give me a better opportunity to accomplish these goals and to actually get better at this process that I need to get better at? And then this is not really a process question, but more of just to get you thinking is, if you choose to play summer ball, when will you have another substantial amount of time off to solely train? So that's just an easy, quick rundown you can go through at the end of your season. And I would recommend coaches doing this as well, because a lot of times coaches are the ones that are pushing players to play summer ball. So coaches, I want you to be reflecting on this as well. Why do you think your guys need to play summer ball or don't need to play summer ball? So to think about it through this lens as well when you're deciding whether to send a guy to school. But I think that's a good rundown. Before we wrap up, do you have anything to close us down with?
No, I think that was a valuable episode I wish I would have had when I was young. So I thought that was good.
Perfect. As always, it's a pleasure. That's the pod.